What's up, Jacob?
What's up, Jimmy? So,
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to our first episode of Football Talk with Jim and Jake. We're just going to dive into our first couple of topics for the week, which is going to be the moving pieces around the NFL, mainly the quarterbacks that have ended up in different places, and then we'll move on to the salary cap and J.J. Watt.
excellent. Yeah, so our first order of business is talking about the quarterback carousel that's going on currently in the NFL. We have three dominoes that have fell so far this offseason. The biggest move so far has been the move with Goff going to the Detroit Lions, along with two first-round picks and a second-round pick, and Matt Stafford heading over to the Los Angeles Rams. Basically, the contracts ended up canceling each other out. The cap hit's going to be $23 million about for both these quarterbacks. Jimmy, based on your years of being a football fan, what team do you think got the better end of the deal with this trade, and what do you see these two teams performing in the next couple of seasons with regards to these new quarterbacks?
I mean, for sure, the Rams got the better end of that deal because Jared Goff, he's kind of a systematic quarterback, but he doesn't have the potential that Tom Brady had. He never had the team around him. So Jared Goff, he's just never been the quarterback to go to. Matthew Stafford just never had the help around him to get to where he needed to be. But now that he's gone to Los Angeles and he has that surrounding him, I think that team's going to go places. In the past, the Rams have made it to the playoffs almost every year, but they just can't break through that ceiling. Now with Matthew Stafford, I think they'll be able to finally push through.
Right.
I don't think the Lions are going to do much with Jared Goff.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think now watching the Rams defense last year, that was one of the best defenses I think I've seen in my lifetime perform, but they just didn't have the offense to back it up. So now they have Matt Stafford in the equation, and also forgot to mention a swap of two former number one overall picks, which is also interesting. The best players in their respective draft classes. With Jared Goff actually got traded for basically nothing. With those picks involved after taking the Rams to the Super Bowl just 2 short years ago, and to see kind of Jared Goff's fall from being a Super Bowl starting quarterback 2 years ago to now being traded for a freaking chocolate bar is pretty interesting to say the least. And the Rams, when they acquired him, and they got the number one pick in that draft, they traded quite a few picks to get the number one pick. And so, now basically to get Jared Goff has cost them 6 first-round draft picks essentially.
Right. Well, like I said, when Goff went to the Super Bowl that year, that wasn't really Goff getting them to that Super Bowl. That was a team that was borrowed and rented. They had Aaron Donald, they had Todd Gurley, they had Cooper Kupp, they had a really good offense, and they had some really good keys on defense. So Jared Goff kind of just coasted there with the help that was built around him. But as soon as that help started to fall off, Goff started to fall off as well.
Absolutely. And the other quarterback that has been moved is Carson Wentz, and he was actually the second overall pick in that same draft year with Goff. And so we have the top 2 picks from, I believe that was the 2016 NFL draft.
That was 2016.
That have now been moved, and Carson Wentz now finds himself in a very favorable situation over in Indianapolis. Indianapolis last year had Phillip Rivers sacked with the lowest sack total of any of the 32 teams, whereas Carson Wentz back in Philadelphia, got sacked more than basically any other quarterback in the league other than Russell Wilson. And obviously, which brings me to how do you believe that the Indianapolis Colts are going to fare this year and the Philadelphia Eagles respectively with this trade, and who won that trade?
Well, ultimately, Carson Wentz needed help. His receivers were dropping balls. He didn't have a lot of protection. He was getting injured left and right. As a Cowboys fan, I'm not a huge Carson Wentz fan. I've always think he's been super overrated heading into the season because he was always top 5, and it's he never lived up to that hype. But now that he's with the Colts and they have that offensive line that you're talking about that just protects the quarterback, and that Colts defense is one of the top defenses in the league. He has all the help that he's needed since he's been on Philadelphia, but he's finally going to be able to make some moves. So I think the Colts made a really good decision. But you know what? We'll just have to go into the season and see what Carson Wentz is capable of when he actually has that help around him.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that brings me to discussing. Speaking of needing help and speaking of rebuilding teams, the Houston Texans. I mean, it has been quite the fall for the Houston Texans. They found themselves only about a year or two ago. They were the premier franchise in the league. They had a young Deshaun Watson, and they fell a little bit short of beating the Kansas City Chiefs to get to the AFC Championship game. And now they find themselves in a very precarious situation. Deshaun Watson wants out. They just released J.J. Watt to sign with a new team. DeAndre Hopkins, they made a very questionable trade. Bill O'Brien did. And obviously we know with Bill O'Brien, he kind of got handed the reins to the franchise and really screwed it up with trading DeAndre Hopkins to Arizona for David Johnson without even getting a first-round pick. And so this just has led me to wonder, will we see Deshaun Watson moved this offseason, Jimmy? Where do you think makes the most sense for him to go? And do you think that he will be moved? And, obviously we know with a young quarterback like him, we're looking at, and we're just seeing the trade for Stafford, we may be looking at a trade to get him of historical proportions, more first-round picks that have ever been traded in one trade before. So what do you think we could expect for, trade details in the situation, and what are potential landing spots for Deshaun Watson?
Well, Deshaun Watson for sure is going to be moving this offseason. Like, there's no question about it. And like you said, it was really just interesting to see the fall of the Houston Empire, because they were capable of going toes with the Chiefs and with the Ravens, like in the AFC playoffs, like every year. It was a pretty good team, and then they started just selling their soul to the devil, releasing everybody that helped them out. J.J. Watt didn't want to be on the team anymore, so he's gone. So Deshaun Watson's definitely going to be on his way out the door, and I think some really good landing spaces for him would be the Patriots, for one, because I don't think they're too pleased with what Cam Newton did with the team last season. The Broncos are definitely in need of a quarterback. Drew Lock isn't really the go-to guy. He's not going to be the quarterback to build that franchise around. So if Deshaun Watson could move there, he could definitely help that team that's been struggling at the quarterback position since Peyton Manning left. Other than that, like, those are the top two destinations. But the Cowboys might be losing Dak soon, depending on the contract negotiations and whether or not Dak wants to stay in Dallas or go to another team. There's been rumors of him ending up in Washington because he followed them on one of the social media sites. So it looks like Dak has one foot out the door. So the Cowboys could definitely use Deshaun Watson if they end up losing Dak Prescott. So top three landing spots, I would say Broncos, Cowboys, and Patriots.
Got it. Yeah. It's interesting because I've looked at the Miami Dolphins, and they've made some trades in the last few years to really get a lot of draft capital. They recently traded Minkah Fitzpatrick, all-pro safety, over to the Steelers, got a couple draft picks out of that. Traded Larry Tunsil, got a couple draft picks out of that. And then they have the number 2 overall pick from last year's draft, Tua Tagovailoa, at quarterback. And so I can see Miami potentially making a move for a quarterback for their next 5-10 years to build their team around. There hasn't really been a good quarterback in Miami since you have to go all the way back to Dan Marino, and obviously Dan Marino never won a title in Miami, but he was beloved by Miami fans. But I think Miami would love to see a contending team come out of Miami and come out to really get competitive with the Bills. I think as I look at the future of the AFC East, I'm seeing a lot of decline. The Jets obviously have been historically bad in the last few years. And they couldn't even lose and tank correctly last year, and then so they ended up dropping in the draft. But in the Patriots, they looked like a mess last year. Looked like they were a few years away from contention, and so that really has just left the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins as the two teams to look at in the AFC East moving forward. And right. So let's stay in the NFC. or the AF, or excuse me, let's move over to the NFC East and discuss the Cowboys. Dak Prescott obviously is having some contract situation issues, and he's coming off a pretty major injury. What can we expect? Obviously, you're a big Cowboys fan, and you've been following them for a long time. What can we expect from Dak Prescott in this upcoming year? And do you expect him to be able to work out a contract, or do you expect him to be playing elsewhere after this year?
Well, we all know how greedy Jerry is. He doesn't like to dish out the money to pay the superstars. Dak's no different. He's going to give Dak the franchise tag, and Dak's probably not going to want to take it. He's a good quarterback. He knows his worth. And if the Cowboys aren't going to give him the money that he wants, it's going to be another DeMarco Murray situation. He's going to be on his way out the door looking for that big money. But with the injury, that kind of does lower his value because, last season was supposed to be the season he proved himself. It was supposed to be like, are the Cowboys going to pay me? I'm going to show them my worth. I'm going to show them my value. But he got injured, so we didn't get to see that out of Dak in that what was supposed to be his contract season. Right. So as a Cowboys fan, I'm hopeful that they can reach an agreement and Dak can remain on the team and get over this injury. But it's not looking too hot right now. And so I think, like I said, Dak does have one foot out the door. And if he heads out, we will need to look in other avenues for a new quarterback, whether that be the draft or that be Deshaun Watson.
Right. And the NFC East, as you know, has been one of the worst divisions in the last couple of years. The biggest question that this has left me with is, will the winner of the NFC East in the upcoming season, in the 2021 season, will the winner of the NFC East be above 500, yes or no?
I believe that they will. Last season was a terrible season, but historically, when all teams in the NFC East do very bad, the next season they come in and, there's 2 or 3 teams battling for the number 1 spot. There hasn't been a lot of change yet in the offseason, in the NFC East particularly, but I believe there will be some big moves. They're not going to stay idle because the NFC East was a joke last season, and, they're not going to stay at the bottom of the barrel. All those teams are going to work to build up. Daniel Jones is young. I think he might do something for the Giants with Saquon Barkley, but that's still, yet to see. But ultimately, I think that the winner of the NFC East will break 500 this season.
Got it. Yeah. It's interesting because the NFC NFC East is historically one of the most competitive divisions in the NFL. In the last 2 years, they've fallen short of that. So yeah, let's talk about Big Ben. Big Ben in the contract situation,
right?
Over in Pittsburgh. I think right now they have him on the books for about $22 million, and the Rooney family has said that they're not going to move forward with Big Ben unless there's a restructure happening. Big Ben said he's willing to do that, but he also understands if the Rooney family doesn't want to move forward with him as quarterback. So a lot of questions are surrounding Pittsburgh's offseason. We have the upcoming departure of James Conner. The Rooney family has already said that they want to pick up the contract option on James Conner, so he'll be a free agent. So they'll be looking for a new running back to be that lead back in Pittsburgh. We've seen really in Pittsburgh a team devoid of running game in the last couple of years, and I think that's made them go away from what traditionally we're used to seeing with the Steelers. And we have some absolute legends that have played the position in Pittsburgh. We got Jerome Bettis. We have Franco Harris, just to name a couple of the superstars that have played the running back position, and that has been a key part of the Pittsburgh franchise. Has been great defenses and a very solid running game. We haven't got that in Pittsburgh, and I think that's what has led them to not be the Super Bowl contender year in and year out that we're so accustomed to seeing. Although Mike Tomlin does have the best winning percentage in the league, I believe, since he's come in, and he's been a consistent force as their head coach. So with that being said, do you think the Steelers should be looking to address their quarterback need with a Deshaun Watson? Do you think they need to be in the draft? What do you see as a next step for the Steelers to secure a successful future, or should they keep Big Ben and then be developing quarterback underneath him and maybe in the draft?
Well, COVID kind of ruined the salary cap, so they're going to be drastically dropping this next season. And Big Ben is the highest hit against that cap, and so he will definitely need to restructure his contract if he wants to remain on the team. But are they going to pay him what he's worth while still, saving money for other players? Probably not. So Big Ben is probably on his way out the door. I think, it is what it is. He's reaching the end of his career. They had a pretty good season last season. But if the Steelers do lose Big Ben, they're going to definitely need a new quarterback at the position because Mason Rudolph, we've seen, is not capable of leading that franchise. So with Big Ben on his way out the door, they would have to look in the draft or, the big name right now is Deshaun Watson. So I think Big Ben, he might even have to retire this season if he can't find a team that's going to pick up his salary because he has a really big contract and he knows his value. So he's not going to take less than what he's worth. But, that goes around the rest of the league too because Patrick Mahomes just signed that 10-year, super big contract.
10 years, $500 million.
Right. So he has a pretty big salary cap hit too. And he needs to understand that he's going to need help around him too because as we've seen in the Super Bowl, he's not capable of doing it on his own. So he might need to take a salary restructure as well, like a contract restructure, to get him that help that he needs when he makes it to that big game again. But back to the Steelers, ultimately, they will be needing to look to another quarterback because I don't think they're going to dish out the money that Big Ben, is deserving of.
Right. No, I totally agree. And, you look at the situation with Mahomes in Kansas City and, right now, obviously, he's still on his rookie contract, and so they have really solid players around him. I mean, he probably has one of the best supporting casts as, weapon-wise, in the entire league. But what's so interesting about this situation is, he's being hailed already after 2 short seasons as the player to watch in this generation, greatest player of his generation, and I think that's an unfair burden to put upon him, and frankly, I don't think he deserves it yet. I mean, you talk about what Tom Brady has done in 10 Super Bowls and winning 6 of them. 7. You can't 7 Super Bowls. Excuse me, winning 7 of them. You can't possibly compare Patrick Mahomes to Tom Brady at this point, and you have the very selfish notion that he took $50 million. That one of my favorite stats in all of the NFL is that no NFL team has won a Super Bowl with a quarterback that has a max contract, and I expect that trend to continue because of the hard salary cap that the NFL has. It's just not doable, and it's not acceptable to have a quarterback take a max salary and expect to win. And you have the same situation with Russell Wilson in Seattle. Russell Wilson is getting paid $35 million a year, and he just recently went on a talk show to voice his displeasure with the ownership of Seattle, saying that they're not giving him enough protection. And mind you, he has gotten rushed and gotten sacked more in the first 8 years of his career than any quarterback in NFL history. But that's all due to the fact that he decided to take a max contract, which has limited the value that can be distributed to the rest of his team, specifically his offensive line. And so, any thoughts on that, Jimmy? Anything to counter that, or are you kind of in the same mindset in terms of quarterbacks taking large contracts?
I mean, you're right. It's not a coincidence that quarterbacks who take the max contract don't, make it to the big game. They don't win the Super Bowl because when you're paying the quarterback all that money, you don't have money to give to help the quarterback. A quarterback's not going to do it on his own. And as we've seen in the past, Tom Brady, he's never taken the max contract. He's always restructured his contract to get the help around him to continue to pay his teammates because he understands that, nobody can do it on their own and they all need help. So, I mean, we've seen the success of Tom Brady, and he's a person who's never taken a max contract. He's just always made sure his teammates got their fair share of the deal. So Absolutely. You're correct. These big quarterbacks who take all the money, they don't have any help around them. And it's not a coincidence. It's not surprising to see that the owners can't pay other players because of that salary cap that exists.
Right. No, absolutely. And I just when you think about great quarterbacks, every team has to have a great quarterback, but it's so important not to spend too much for it. And all eyes as we approach the draft are on the Jacksonville Jaguars, the number 1 pick overall of the draft, with maybe looking at one of the best prospects, one of the best quarterback prospects in recent years, in Trevor Lawrence. Just recently got his left elbow surgically repaired, and he looks all ready to go and to lead the Jacksonville Jaguars to contention and to being a team year in year out that has to be worried about in the AFC South. With that being said, in this next season, Jimmy, who are your young quarterbacks to watch? Either your rookie or sophomore quarterbacks that you think are going to make big jumps in their second or third seasons.
Right. Well, like you said, Trevor Lawrence, he's the biggest name coming into the draft. He's definitely, all eyes are going to be on him. But I've never been one to, follow the hype of the rookie quarterbacks coming in because, we've seen Johnny Manziel's in the past. We've seen Tim Tebow's. Yep. We've seen Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston. So, you have these players that do really good in college but end up, on teams that either, they're not going to do well in. It's bad teams that, they've done historically bad the past 5-10 seasons, which is why they get the number 1 pick, like the Jaguars.
Right.
So Trevor Lawrence may or may not do good on the Jaguars, but like I said, I'm never into, oh my gosh, this rookie quarterback's going to be huge for this team. He's going to take them all the way. We've seen that doesn't really tend to work out. So my quarterbacks to watch, I don't know. The young quarterback's killing it in the game right now, I think, is Kyler Murray, but I think he's going into his 3rd season.
Yep, 3rd season.
Baker Mayfield, for sure. We've seen what he did with the Browns last season. Who else do we have? We have, I don't know. I think that's about it for the young quarterbacks. I wouldn't consider Patrick Mahomes to be in that class anymore. At this point, I would consider him to be a veteran player, Lamar Jackson as well. So those 2 quarterbacks, I feel like are going to...
I think it's interesting because, I think one of my favorite quarterbacks and teams to watch in the last couple of years has been the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. And we see the Buffalo Bills as they have been over the course of their existence as a franchise is a team that really has always flew under the radar. And even when they were going to 4 different Super Bowls in a row and losing all 4, you really saw that the Buffalo Bills became the lovable loser in the NFL. And I think it's about time. I think they're knocking on the door the last few years. They got Stephon Diggs, getting Josh Allen, some players around him. I look to the Buffalo Bills to the next couple of years take the AFC and maybe even get a ring in there. But they'll, obviously, as we've seen over the course of Tom Brady's career, you have to get through Tom Brady to win the Super Bowl. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the Buccaneers, if they continue to win the NFC South moving forward and win the NFC just because of Tom Brady's leadership and the players they get around him. Just some notable players that he led to the title this year. Leonard Fournette, came in as number 2 or 3 overall pick in the draft with the Jacksonville Jaguars a couple of years back. He actually was released by Jacksonville and was a key player for the Bucs down the stretch, right, as they won the Super Bowl. And the same goes for another guy, Antonio Brown, right? Antonio Brown
what a story.
Had bounced around the league, was ridiculed by football fans across America, and Antonio Brown won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. And so Tom Brady he makes all his teammates better. He puts his personal kind of wants and needs to the wayside because he just wants to win. He just loves to win, and he's going to do anything that he can to win. And it's really incredible to see a player that was selected that low in the draft with he's not a very athletically gifted individual as many people know compared to the other quarterbacks in the NFL, but his mentality is second to none. He gets it done every year, and I think he has to be considered at this point in his career the greatest player of all time.
Yeah. I'll get to Tom Brady in a second. Some two players who slipped my mind when we were talking about young quarterbacks was Josh Allen being one and Sam Darnold. I don't know how I forgot about them, but they're definitely leaders of their teams that have, they were drafted to historically bad teams, and they've shown progress, especially Josh Allen taking the Bills to the playoffs, almost to the Super Bowl. That was the best Bills team that we've seen in recent years. Back to Tom Brady, he is definitely a leader. People are quick to throw around the GOAT title. I think he's had help in the past with Bill Belichick. This year on the Buccaneers, he had his old teammates back with Gronkowski. He had help with Antonio Brown, Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette, by the way, definitely deserved that ring. He was a good player for the Jaguars, but he was going nowhere on that team. So it was cool to see him team up with Tom Brady and finally get the opportunity to play in that big game and win it. Say what you will about Tom Brady, but you're correct. He is a leader, and he's great at it, which is why he's come so far in this league. Because he knows, like I said, he knows how to share the wealth with his teammates to make sure he has the talent around him, and he knows how to, keep that talent around him, and he knows what to do with them, and how to utilize them and how to utilize his weapons. So while I don't believe he's the greatest of all time, he is definitely one of the greatest. I feel like if other quarterbacks were in his position, they would have, had the same success, especially Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees.
Who do you, Jimmy Warner, believe to be the greatest player of all time, and why?
That's an interesting question. That's a very subjective conversation. As a Cowboys fan, I tend to be biased towards Captain America, Roger Staubach, the creator of the Hail Mary. He was really good for the Cowboys, but I can't sit there and throw around Cowboys as being the greatest of all time because, the bias will show. So ultimately, I didn't see Joe Montana play. I wasn't alive for that, but I do believe that he is deserving of the title of greatest of all time. And if we're talking about quarterbacks of this generation, I believe it should go to Aaron Rodgers. He only has one ring to show for it, but, he has multiple MVPs. He's not always had the team around him to get him the places that he needs to be, but time and time again, he takes that Packers team to the playoffs and does what he has to. So I believe that Aaron Rodgers or Joe Montana are deserving of the title of greatest of all time.
Interesting, and that's given for the record that Tom Brady's been to 10 Super Bowls and won 7 of them. Joe Montana has 5 Super Bowl wins, and
0 losses.
When you say doesn't have you say doesn't have help around him, and Joe Montana had the greatest wide receiver of all time to throw to, Jerry Rice, so you can't take that away from him. He had excellent weapons, was under Bill Walsh, great coach in San Francisco. And, Tom Brady has done what Joe Montana never did. Joe Montana, at the tail end of his career, went to play in Kansas City, could not bring a title to the Kansas City Chiefs, whereas Tom Brady obviously played the majority of his career in New England, left his future Hall of Fame coach, and took his talents to Tampa Bay and won a title in the second city. Very similar to another one of my favorite players, LeBron James, Mr. LeBron James, who has now won in 3 different cities. That's all the time we have today. We're approaching our 30 minutes, but appreciate everyone for joining us here today. This is Jake and Jim talk show, and we look forward to connecting with you soon and sharing more. As NFL season progresses, NFL offseason, progresses, and we move towards the NFL season and the 2021 season, and we hope to have fans in the stand and have a more of a degree of normalcy and less COVID-19 protocols. So, this is Jacob Namath and Jimmy Warner with Jake and Jim Talk Show, and we will see you soon. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks for being here, Jacob.